there is no faculty member belonging to any of the reserved communities in your in your institute. This was in 93, 94 maybe, and I think it was in 96 or 97 when reservation was first implemented in CIEFL, as it used to be called at that time. And now, like after say from 96 to after 15 years, of course, obviously there has been a sea change, and I'm like very happy to see that. I'm sad that I'm not part of it now, but then I feel happy when I come back seeing the kind of changes that have happened both among the faculty, not in terms of the existing older faculty members, but the new, like there's a lot of there's a kind of fresh blood that has crept in, and also among the students, and I see a very vibrant community with so many banners all around about issues, contemporary issues. And so I obviously am speaking to a different kind of, what should I say, different kind of set of students than who like I used to have as peers, and also maybe as when I was a teacher also. I was a teacher in 2002 to 2007 when it was already slightly changing, but it was not very different from here. And coming from say a system like Delhi University, where I would say when I joined there in 2007, I would say the system was very much, or not that much different from what it used to be, say in CIEFL in 92 or so. Not that there was no reservation policy, there was a reservation policy. Delhi University is actually, I should not be saying this when I'm recorded, but I would say it is the rogue university of the country which never implements any of the welfare policies of and reservation policies of the government, and they have been rapped on their knuckles time and again. Like earlier when Professor Thorett was the chairman, there was a big standoff between the university and the UGC, where the UGC froze all the posts and said, unless you fill up the reserved post, we are not going to allow you to fill up any other post. So, but the issue at that time was slightly different, because SC/ST reservation with whatever kind of lacuna in its implementation, in spite of that, it was somewhere in place. So you had, if not to the fullest percentage, but there was a substantial representation among the teaching community, and of course among the students also in Delhi University. But 2007 was the year when, as you might remember, the OBC reservation started getting implemented. OBC reservation, as you may recall, was passed in 2006 in the Central Educational Institutions Act, CEI Act as it came to be called, in 2006, and its implementation started from 2007, I think, 7, 8, 9, 10, yeah. So that was the first year of OBC reservation. And if you remember, some of you I'm sure remember, that it was a phased implementation. So the 27% was not to be implemented in one go, but it was to be phased in across 3 years, so that it was first year 9%, 18 and 27, with corresponding increase of 18, 34 and 57, 54. That kind of increase in the total strength also. Now, so I think all the teachers there had, come to accept SC/ST reservation as a kind of fact of life. Whether they liked it or not. Because they have lived with it for so long, and they have seen many attempts to kind of subvert it, to play with it. Have always, very few battles have won, because ultimately when it comes to the legislature, when it comes to when it comes out of the university, as long as these questions are within the university, because of the kind of structure that most of the universities have in terms of academic councils, or which are actually by and large dominated by senior professors who are very much averse and anti-reservation. I mean, but once you take the debate out of that, once you go into larger kinds of issues, you will see that there are always there is more support for this, because after all, it is also a matter of numerical strength, right? I mean, in the universities, okay, the SC, ST, OBC communities may be in minority. I am sure even now, in spite of the fact that on paper we are supposed to be 49%, but I don't know so much about EFL, but in Delhi University, I mean, it's nowhere near. If it is 49% of what it used to be, what they do is then the general category will be, earlier if it were 50, they would have been 100 now. So if you look at percentage wise, the percentage will be still nowhere near 49%. But 2006 was a time when there were very few, like among OBC students or teachers, whoever had come in were mostly people who had come in through the general, so-called general merit, which means they are like not politicized. I mean, they are not like aware of many various issues. I'm not making sweeping statements. I mean, but still that could be the case. And also there is this question of stigma attached to the reservation. So it's it's very important that this kind of one realizes that because I was just talking to Professor Satyanarayana just before I came. So he was telling me that in a lot of SCST meetings, the first thing they ask is, how many of you here are belong to SCST communities? Please stand up. So he asked me, like, why don't you do something like that there? Let's see how many OBCs are there, and let's see whether they will actually stand up, because quite a number of people might think that, okay, there is stigma attached to this, so why should I own up and say that, yeah, I belong to this community, or should I not? And if I own it up, then I know that my very close friends who saw me in a kind of light will see me in a completely different light from tomorrow if I say that I belong to this community. So because of this, that's another issue. So a lot of people, OBCs who were there at that time, may have not come through reservation, so no one would have known that they belong to OBC communities, and so they would have thought, okay, now, I mean, if I speak up, they will think that, okay, I'm an OBC, so maybe I should keep quiet and let things happen. And the situation in Delhi University was such that there was like 9% of seats reserved for OBCs at that time. But so I can talk of actual figures, like say in the department which I joined, maybe I don't remember the exact figures, but then roughly we would have had, say, 30 to 40 seats which were kept aside for OBCs. And because of a very strange kind of implementation or interpretation of the court ruling which came in 2008, if you know if you followed the debate on OBC reservation, after the 2006 Act was passed, it was immediately challenged in the Supreme Court. The constitutional validity of the amendment and also the Act was challenged. What usually is referred to as the Ashok Kumar Thakur versus Union of India case, which went on for I think almost a year, and the judgment came out in 2008, where the court actually upheld the constitutional amendment and the Act. So now the funny part of this was that this is a judgment about which the late advocate K. Balagopal also has written a very good piece which got published in EPW on this judgment. I mean, it shows like utmost judicial irresponsibility. I mean, again, another thing which I could be charged tomorrow for. In the sense that this was a judgment which was delivered by 5 judges. And all the 5 judges upheld the constitutional validity of the amendment and the Act, and they said that yes, I mean, the government has the right to do this, and they are right in doing this. This doesn't violate fundamental rights. But then each of the judges also, more speculatively rather than as directive. I mean, in judgments, as you may know, there is a very operative part which actually gives a clear instruction as to what to do, and there is what's called the obiter dicta, which is like they talk about sundry things, and they may speculate and all that. So in the course of that, all the judges had various things to speculate about how to implement this. And if you remember those times, that was a time when there was this a kind of protest which was projected by the media as a large-scale popular protest, but which actually only a very handful of people were involved in this. But since they got extensive media coverage, and I mean, like they had the what should I say? The services of the best advocates in the country, like advocates like K.K. Venugopal and Harish Salve, who may charge lakhs, 10 to 15 lakhs for a 10-minute appearance. So they had come, and of course all the so-called English media channels, TV channels captured this all. Like 50 people will be, not even 50, that's what, I mean, people in Delhi say it's sometimes not even 50. People will be, holding this thing and protesting. And then it is given so much coverage in the media as the whole nation is burning and, this is such a big issue. And as popularly came to know, consolidated as the Youth for Equality. So this was the time when this particular, I mean, this whole, the 2008 of the Ashok Kumar Thakur was, instrumentalized by the Youth for Equality wing. And finally when the judgment came, as I was saying, so 5 judges upheld this, but then each of the judges had, different things to say about how this should be implemented. And one or two judges completely kept silent about it, as they should actually have, as everyone should have. But then, so the judges, while delivering the judgment, I mean, they knew that they have to uphold this because this is constitutionally valid, and it is the need of the land that there should be affirmative action and there should be reservation. And I would say there should be reservation as long as there is equal representation. I mean, I would say the reservation should end when, say, in the so-called general category, if you have a proportionate representation of the SC, ST and OBC categories, then we should say, okay, now we don't need a reservation. Till then, I would say there is a reservation, and that is, I mean, I don't think I should be speaking for, I mean, I'm not speaking about, I'm not giving you arguments for reservation, because I kind of presume that this is an audience which actually all of whom believe in the need for reservation, right? So I don't think I should be addressing that issue. But then, this is like as simple as that, and because time and again you come across this question: should there be caste-based reservation? Do you think it's necessary? Do you think that's the right way to progress and or go ahead and so on? I mean, so my understanding of this is as simple as that. I mean, so the judges knew this, and they knew that based on legal principles of social equity, justice, whatever, they have to uphold this. But at the same time, they had to answer to this, they had to respond to this so-called wide protest which was going on. They had to, so the judgment actually speaks to the Youth for Equality in how to appease them. So that is why the judges were wondering about what will happen to merit, when this happens. And I mean, it's fairly simple. The question about merit is never an issue of merit, right? I mean, because if the real issue is merit, I mean, you would expect these kind of protests to come out whenever there are these private management colleges and institutions coming up where you can pay a capitation fee and to get admission. No one speaks about merit there, because that itself shows that this is not an issue of merit. This is basically an issue of changing the social fabric. Because if you have a capitation private management college, the social fabric is not going to change, because the very same people, the kind of people who will go through so-called merit, will have also their cultural capital plus their real capital, which they can use to. So what they don't get through their so-called merit, they can use, they can. But it's the same kind of people, right? But then once you implement reservation, you have another kind of people. And then so-called no one in the power structures know how to handle this. So this changes the social fabric. This gives rise to so many issues, as you find in your university now. Like, I mean, every day there are new issues, like issues of students failing, issues of harassment, and quite often teachers are lost. They don't know how to, because they haven't dealt with this kind of issues before. They haven't faced this. So the judges were kind of addressing this. So I would say, I mean, this is my own interpretation of it. So they were like, wondering about how not to, make the damage to this kind of class the minimum. So seats were increased for them. I mean, not for them, the overall intake. Otherwise, there is no, like, all of you know that. I mean, so institutions which were admitting 100 students till that point were supposed to admit 154, a 54% increase in the number of seats, because so that the general category, right, should not get affected. And you can find statements in the the judgment, like, I don't remember the judge, but one of the judges say, in the issue of society at large, I mean, it's very clear what society the judges have in mind, right? I mean, they say in the issue of society at large, it should be balanced. That means not for reservation. The anti-reservation thing is for them, the society at large. And we know that what kind of society it is, what's the numerical strength, what kind of class. I mean, that's the class which control the media and have the power. So the judges were addressing them, and that's why I would say they kind of said various ways. So one, the Justice Dalveer Bhandari, who is currently even now in the Supreme Court, so he had this very speculative thought. He said, maybe we can reduce 10 marks from the, so there should be some kind of balance maintained between social justice and merit, right? As though those two things are different. So it's not like merit is here and social justice is here. There is no social justice or merit without talking to each other. So, but the judges wanted to maintain this, and so they said, let's have this 10% cap on the relaxation. Let us not, if general category students get admitted at a particular mark, let's not go down to, let's not reduce the marks considerably. Let's say, and he said it like by way of illustration. He said it's not an order. It's not an order in the sense it's not part of the what's called the ratio decidendi, which means the operative part of the actual judgment which has to be followed. Now, so the judgment was kind of upheld, and then the government also, earlier I spoke about the kind of the pro powers in the legislative body, but then as you know, it's not always that, right? Quite often the executive is also not in the legislature may be in the hands of the so-called the Dalit Bahujan people and so on. The hands in the sense considerable representation at least, but not so much in the executive class. So the executive class was completely apathetic to this, and MHRD immediately issues an order the very next day saying that, yeah, implement reservation, but keep 10% variation with the marks. And then, various universities immediately had various kinds of interpretation about how to go about this. And I would say Delhi University was the university which took the most regressive kind of interpretation. So what the Delhi University did was to make use of this term which judges, I would say, used very irresponsibly, actually. They said, let the cutoff marks be 10% below. And this cutoff mark is used in various sense in various kinds of contexts. So in the context of Delhi University, the cutoff mark is the mark of the last admitted candidate. So immediately colleges said, okay, last admitted candidate, and I'm sure you're following some of the news which gets published, comes from Delhi. Like this year, the Sri Ram College of Commerce had 100% as cutoff for their BCom honors program. 100%. And they filled all their seats at that. This is the kind of cutoff mark. This is not true of all the colleges in Delhi, but many of these colleges. So quite often it's about 90%, even for courses in arts and humanities. So that's the cutoff. So the last general category candidate gets admitted at 91. So they said we will go up to 81. But colleges said, no, we can't go up to 81. We can't compromise on merit. So 91, let's reduce it by 1 point. Let's reduce it by 2 points. So in the first year, very few colleges actually even gave that 10%. By and large, the percentage which was given was 3 or 4, up to 5. 5 is like very generous. So that means if it's 91 for general category, OBC admission stops at 86. That is a good thing. In many colleges, it could be even 88, right? And because of this, large-scale seats remain vacant. In my department, where we actually implemented this 10% in the way it was supposed to be implemented, at least within DU. So if it was, say, I don't remember exact figures, but if it was 65 for general candidates, we went up to 55 for OBC. But obviously, all the 40 seats could not be filled, so large-scale seats remained vacant. That is where the other part in with the judgment, where the judges were catering to youth for equality. They said, okay, if seats remain vacant, you convert them to general category, which makes no sense at all. I mean, if there are some seats, there is a quota intact. I mean, so even if you say convert, I mean, they should have said, yeah, you convert it to general category and you give the right proportion to SC and all the other categories. But they said no, as if general category had some kind of monopoly over higher education. They said give seats en masse to general category. So, and this is like the reality is that in Delhi University, when admission started, the first day teachers will say, yeah, we have 40 OBC seats, so maybe we can convert 35 of them because we will not get anyway. They will not, OBCs will not come. So we will have 35 general categories extra seats. Now what will happen is, if we wait till all admission is over, all the good students will go to other colleges. So let us admit general category students in excess right on the first day, so that we get good students. Because we can't compromise on merit, right? So they would admit, if they have 100 seats, they would admit 150. And there is an OBC adjustment mein wo equal jayega. That's the stock phrase. So, I mean, when we were saying this, like, I mean, that was my first experience in Delhi, and like we were completely shocked. I mean, we didn't know what's happening. First thing we thought, okay, 10% should be, implemented properly. We could raise voice, and then we met the Vice Chancellor. We kind of told him, yeah, please, at least you say that the 10% should be implemented. He said, I can send directive, but it will not be binding because colleges are autonomous. So he said, I can say that you should give maximum this and all, but I don't think he even did that. Now, so we saw that these seats were completely, getting diverted, and that's when actually some of us sat together and we were wondering what to do. So we met various OBC MPs who, will understand our issue, but then they will say, because first of all, this is higher education, so they know that it's not like, it doesn't affect, everyone in the country, and it doesn't affect their constituency. And they say that the moment some MPs actually told us, if we come and then immediately all media will be against us, we will have very bad image in the media, so we don't want to openly. We understand your struggle, you should do something, you go out to the street. They told us actually, they said, you organize people, you bring thousands into the streets, we will come with you. But on our own we cannot make statements about this because that will give us a negative image. But if there is a public protest and all that, then we can join your cause. But where do we university teachers, forget about 1,000, we couldn't even organize like 100. When we used to have demonstrations, like some 10 or 15 teachers and students together will come. So we met Kapil Sibal, who was in his first tent as was it Kapil? I think it was Kapil Sibal, 2007. Right? So Kapil Sibal, we had met at that time, and he said, see, I understand this thing, and we asked him, see, do you think that this kind of in BA, BSc undergraduate admission, this is how it should be taking place? And then what is the point of this legislative act then? This is actually by the executive measures, by judiciary plus executive measures. The legislative act is completely become null and void because legislature said, okay, social empowerment, implement reservation, but they don't let you implement. He said, I understand all your points, but then my hands are tied because the Supreme Court judgment says this, so what can I do about it? You fight it in the court. We went to the court, we went to Supreme Court said, we have this Ashok Kumar Thakur judgment was there, and then there was a clarification on this, what's called the PV Indiration, which came again in 2008, September, October, I think. So the Supreme Court said, we have already issued a clarification on our earlier judgment, we can't go on clarifying this, so you approach the High Court and seek clarification. So Supreme Court dismissed us, but then they gave us liberty to go to High Court, which is strange. I don't know why the Supreme Court should give us liberty. I think constitutionally all of us have liberty, but then still they say, you go to the High Court. So we went to the High Court, and the High Court admitted our case, but then as you know, how the case, it goes on, came for hearing, and then the university has all kinds of stories to say. But at least one positive thing we could achieve was that we said, see, look here, the university fixes 91 and say 85 or 81. Let's say when it's 81, and then seats are vacant, right? 91 for general, 81 for OBC, and then when seats are vacant, they reduce 91 to 90 to 89 to 88. So it could go to 85. There is no limit. So it could even go to 81. It could even go to 80. So finally you may have general category admission at 80 and OBC admission at 81 if you continue this kind of thing. So then the court said, no, that is wrong. So what they should do is if they are reducing, if it is 91, 81 and then they reduce it to 90, let them reduce this also to 80. So there should be a corresponding. But maintain 10% because that is the Supreme Court judgment. We cannot do this, anything about it. So the case was going on. It is in that context that in 2009 or 10 maybe, a couple of JNU students also went to court, because in what happened in JNU was that JNU had a different kind of interpretation of this. It's very funny, two central universities in the same city but in different interpretations. JNU had the correct kind of interpretation which was based on the minimum marks. But then people realized that, DU is doing this, DU is Delhi University, DU is doing this, so why should JNU be doing different? So Youth for Equality in JNU gave a representation to the Vice Chancellor there and said, your interpretation of 10% for OBC is wrong, you are violating the Supreme Court judgment. And then the Vice Chancellor sought legal opinion from Advocate P.P. Rao, who is the Youth for Equality advocate actually, who happens to be a standing counsel of JNU also. It's all the same people, right? The same advocate will come argue for JNU, the same advocate will go for argue for Youth for Equality. So but we also had the same issue. We had an advocate arguing for the university, Delhi University, who actually later represented OBC students. So it's like as I was telling Ravi yesterday, most of them are like Ramjet Milani, right? Whoever goes, they will argue their case. That's all. So. But no, not all of them are like that. Some of the people who take up OBC cases usually are ideologically kind of supportive of that, but not P.P. Rao. So P.P. Rao said, yeah, your interpretation is wrong, the DU interpretation is correct, so please do that. He on his own wisdom gave that. And so in 2009 or 10, I don't remember the dates exactly, I have done, JNU changed the admission policy and JNU started saying, okay, we will also admit only on the last admitted. Then seats started falling vacant there. So then two students from JNU went to court, and it is in 2010 Delhi High Court issued an order saying, that's a very good judgment. I would say anyone interested in the reservation issue should read that judgment by Justice Rajiv Sahai and law. Judgments, as you know, are on the website. So that very clearly said, no, this interpretation is completely wrong. Cutoff marks has never been used in any of the judgments in this sense. So what JNU is doing is bad in law. The judge categorically said there should be a minimum fixed, and if there is a minimum fixed, you give relaxation on that. That is the correct procedure. So JNU students those two students at least got justice. But whereas DU was still implementing the same kind of old interpretation, the most regressive interpretation. Now, after this, interestingly, this again throws some light on the judiciary. The same P.V. Indireshan, who had gone for clarification, who is a Youth for Equality person, challenges the JNU judgment in Supreme Court. Right? He goes as a PIL, public interest litigation, and Supreme Court immediately admits Indireshan's appeal. Whereas when we appealed, they had said, no, you go to, we have, given clarification, we can't clarify. But when Youth for Equality go, their cases are immediately admitted to the Supreme Court. Whereas when you go for OBC reservation, it's very difficult actually to get the judges to listen to you. Actually, we tried it through students. We have tried because if I am personally doing it, then I do it as a public interest litigation. And public interest litigation, usually judges always ask, what is your locus standi? What is your interest? Whereas if you are a student who is directly suffering, then it's a violation of your fundamental right? So then the court should be more sympathetic. But even when we approached as students from DU, the Supreme Court said, go to the High Court. But when P.V. Indiresh goes to the Supreme Court took it on board and said, yes, let us look at this, particular judgment. And it was, luckily there was no stay on that. That is one good thing. Court did not stay the JNU judgment, but they said, let us call for this. So then our case was in High Court, so we also from Delhi University, we also pleaded. Officially we were never part of so we will not find our names in the record, but then our advocate was there, so we were heard. In Supreme Court, even if you are not there, any advocate can come and speak on an issue because they are more worried about the principles rather than the technicalities. So the Supreme Court admitted the P.V. Indiresh's appeal, and the judgment which came in 2000, which year? Yeah, this year, the current year in August, which, you must have read about that in newspaper, which ultimately upheld the Delhi High Court judgment, which said that 10% should not be on the last admitted candidate, but it should be on the minimum, whatever minimum you fix. So that judgment was upheld in 2000, finally in the Supreme Court. Now, it's very interesting it took the court 2 months to arrive to deliver this judgment. Although it was right from the very first day of hearing, it was very clear. But for the judges, it was very clear. For the counsels leading the case, also it was very clear. Only the Youth for Equality advocates would come and say, they would go on and on about the same point about merit. They would say, JNU is a prestigious university, how can you allow the merit to go down there? So, this should not happen. And they would say that in Delhi University, it is not being done. But then immediately our advocate and students said, no, but we are also challenging it. Delhi University is not doing it the right way, so it is being challenged. And the judges also say, yeah, it is very clear, they look at all they say, they ask at their face and say that how can you expect an OBC non-creamy layer student to score 85% and get into your program? You cannot. That means you are saying that there is no reservation, so you cannot do that. The judges said it point blank in the first instance itself. But then day after day they would adjourn the matter. They would say, at some point one advocate will come and say, no, we have another point to raise, and it will go on and on. Till again the very same P.P. Rao, who was actually instrumental in this, came and pleaded, and he said, this judgment, the 2008 judgment, what's contentious about it is Justice Dalvir Bhandari's words. And since Dalvir Bhandari is a sitting judge in the Supreme Court now, let us ask him for clarification. Now, this was the most, wily kind of argument one can ever think of. The judges immediately kind of repelled. They said, they asked him, P.P. Rao is a senior counsel. They asked, Mr. P.P. Rao, you are a senior counsel, you have as much experience as we have here in legal matters. Have you ever heard a judge being asked to interpret his judgment? This is not done. A judgment is not like it's not like your own personal correspondence or something like that you are asked for clarification. It's a public thing, and anyone with an equal stature should be able to interpret it. So the judges said this is not done. But still they say, okay, and Justice Ravindran, who was one of the judges, said, I have 2-3 months to retire. I'm on the verge of retirement. I don't want to enter into controversies, so I don't want to take a decision on this. Let me ask the Chief Justice to arbitrate on this matter. So let the Chief Justice look into it. Which all the advocates there were shocked. They were coming out and saying, how can this happen? This is not done. They should have just dismissed that kind of plea. It's not entertained. But this is because this is not an issue of OBC reservation. The advocates were more worried. They said this is setting a very bad judicial precedent. Because hereafter any judgment, people will say, now let's go and ask that judge. That's not how judgments are to be interpreted, right? So they were saying, they were very much worried. But still, it was given to the Chief Justice, and Chief Justice said, no, this is not done like that. Let them give their interpretation, and then finally, that's the judgment we got. Now, what actually is interesting about that judgment, that's where the arithmetic comes in. Now, the arithmetic part is very interesting. I'm sure there's no one from mathematics background here. I don't know, maybe Indranil might have a better view on this. So if I ask an ordinary person, what's the difference between, like somebody, candidate A scores 90 marks, candidate B scores 80 marks. What's the difference in percentage between them? 10%, right? That's the usual. So the difference between 90 and 80 in out of 100 is 10%. That's how common people understand it, right? But not if you're a mathematician. Sorry? Yeah, for a mathematician, it is 11. Yeah, or people who have not, you don't have to be a mathematician, but then if you have, have that kind of, engagement with the subject, then you will know that. Because the way to calculate it is, you have to check, the difference is 10 marks, right? You have to check what percentage is 10 marks of 90, right? Not of 100. See, that's the catch. The catch is there. So the difference in percentage is to be calculated. If A scores 90 and B scores 80, their difference in percentage is the percentage 10 upon 90 and not upon 100, which will be, I don't know, yeah, if you have a calculator you can check. It must be more than 11, I think, right? I mean, 1 mark should be more than 11. Yeah. Now, the judges who delivered this, Dalvir Bhandari definitely is not a mathematician, and when he said 10%, he meant simple things like, if general category is 40, give 30. Up to 30, not necessarily 30, up to 30, depending on the, that is, I mean, institutions so can say only 35. Maybe seats are filled, okay, fine. I mean, if seats are not filled, then we should ask why, right? But, so up to 10%, so when Dalvir Bhandari said this, he clearly meant 40 and 30. Now, what IITs immediately, IITs, not just mathematicians, what kind of mathematicians, right? So they immediately said, yeah, 10%, we know what is 10%. So if it is 150 for general category, then it will be 135 for OBC. 15 marks. That is the 10% difference. Your total must be 700, right? Your total is out of 700. So we say out of 700, general category should score 150. And then we will say we will give 15 marks relaxation for OBC because that is 10%. 10% is not on 700. Right? I mean, if I and you sit there, we will say 10%. So it is 150 on 700, then it should be 70 marks below. 10% of 700, so it should be 80, right? But IITs never did that. Even now, I mean, right from day one, they didn't do that. So IITs were following that model. Some central universities like, which is the EFL model also. EFL, as far as I understood, your former Vice Chancellor, the way he explained it to me, I mean, I don't know the actual marks, but then when he explained it to me, I think he meant something like this. It's 10% of that. Now, but this was not the interpretation in, because the illustrations are very clear. I mean, they talk about percentage, but then also they say, 40 marks, 30 marks. So which means it's, because if it is 10% of 40, it should only be 36, right? So 40 and 36, not 40 and 30. But the judges did not say 40 and 36, the judges said 40 and 30. So this was what was said in 2008 judgment. But when it came to 2011, this judgment, I mean, this again you should read it not for, to get enlightened about any of these issues. But you will see, the very same judges, in 3 places they talk about this 10%, but they don't say it in the same way. When it comes to actual implementation, because it is, I mean, I should not be criticizing them like this, but then it's very clear it's been fed to them that this is what we should come out with. So when it comes to the operative part, they very clearly say, so if OBC is, general category is 40, fix it as 36, up to 36 for OBC. If it is 50, fix it up to 45 for OBC, which means 10% of 50 or 10% of 40, as the case may be. But when they discuss this, where they don't have to be very careful, because the actual operative part is very, I mean, they have to weigh each word, because one wrong word and things can change. Whereas the other part is not binding, so they just speak as ordinary people. And there they say, yeah, I mean, courts have always said that there should be some kind of balancing between, merit and social justice. So earlier also in Preeti Srivastava case, they have said the difference can be, 10%. So they said 40 for general category, 30 for OBC. The same judgment, right? The same judgment they are saying, when they are not careful, they are saying 10%, 40, 30. But when it comes to the operative part, they say 10%, 40, 36. So it's very clear. I mean, it's not that suddenly they become mathematicians and mathematically minded and they know what exactly 10% is. They have been told, like, this is how the correct interpretation. Whereas as ordinary people, they know that 10% is not like that. Now you may wonder, like, okay, 40, 36, this does not, make much difference. But then, as I said, the admission tests are not always 100, right? Delhi University Law Faculty admission test is on 700. So if it's 700, then it could be like a question of 15 marks or 70 marks. And 15 marks is like, I think, 2 or 3 questions. So the only difference between a general category and an OBC should be in terms of 2 or 3 questions. Whereas 70, if you go for 70, even then I'm not sure that all the seats will get filled. But at least you may have, that is another issue, right? Actually what we wanted to do when we first approached the court was we wanted to challenge this 10%. Because this 10%, today actually I've been speaking about the correct interpretation of 10%, but actually, my position is not about correct interpretation of 10%, because in Justice Endlaw judgment, he says very clearly, he asks questions like, what is this 10%? It is as if deprivation was 10%. No one has studied deprivation and said that the deprivation is actually in terms of 10%, right? So unless you have that, this is, some judges arbitrarily said, and they never thought that this is going to be taken as, gospel and it's going to be implemented like that. They were thinking of various models, and they ultimately thought the government and universities will evolve a good model and come with proper implementation. But by that time, the government had, the ministers had changed, although the government had not changed so much. So there is a lot of difference between the MHRD in times of Arjun Singh and the MHRD in times of Kapil Sibal, for instance. They were least bothered in to implement this in the right manner. Actually, when we filed the affidavit, they filed a counter saying the government has done all that we could do, and we are very committed to. Kapil Sibal is saying this, right, on affidavit. Not in his name, but whatever MHRD. We are committed to this, and we know how committed people like him are. So government was apathetic. So were universities. So no university, UGC did not bother, and so they left it. It was like free for all. Each university had its own interpretation. So you had one extreme DU kind of interpretation, one extreme this 10% on actual marks, complete marks on the minimum. One interpretation, 10% of the qualifying marks of the general category. So at least 3 different interpretations were there, and it was like to pick and choose depending on the will of the people in the universities. Different schemes were implementing. Now the danger of this judgment actually is that the most liberal interpretation is going to be thrown out. So I don't think now any university will in the next academic year fix it as 40 and 30, because this judgment clearly says 40 and 36 or 50 and 45. So which means in effect this judgment is not, that's why we don't consider this, even in terms of 10%, this is a bad judgment, because this takes the mathematical interpretation of 10% and not what I would say the layman's interpretation of 10%. So one is to get the layman's interpretation of 10%. We wanted to immediately ask for clarification, or because it's very clear in the same judgment there is contradiction, right? So if the same judgment there is contradiction, but there is no guarantee that the courts will entertain, because they will say, no, what is said in that part is not binding, what is said in the last part is clear, so there is no confusion. So they will only maybe cement this and say, this is the correct interpretation. So that's why our advocates actually said, don't go for any litigation now, because that may be counterproductive. Let us wait and see how things turn out, and then, because all these things can only be done like over the years. It took like 2-3 years for actually to reach after the judicial enactment. It took that much time. So he said, advised, like, let's wait. So one thing is about getting the right interpretation, but what's actually most important and what we should be thinking about, what we should work towards, is to take away this 10%. What is the meaning of 10%? There is no 10% of deprivation. So the basic policy should be, if there are 27% seats are reserved, 27% of seats should be filled, and 27% should be on the basis of the actual admitted and not in terms of the approved strength. DU colleges are like, rogue. They will, for OBCs and SC and ST, they will admit according to the approved strength. But if you look at the actual admission, it will be general category in terms of 100, it will be 200. I have no, disagreement with that. Let them admit if they have resources, if they have classroom space, if they have teachers to teach, let them admit. But then let them also admit, increase the reserved categories correspondingly. That's the argument. I'm not saying that they should not admit general category more. Let them admit. I mean, well and good. Let more and more people get education. But then that should be followed by a corresponding increase so that the percentages are maintained, right? I mean, it should not be like what it was. The government said 27 out of 100, but now in effect it becomes 27 out of 200, right? That's what's happening. So that's why we are actually planning to do another round of RTIs and all based on this. The actual we have to. I haven't spoken about so much, but I think I've already spoken enough, so I don't want to talk about how, the kind of actions that we did and the RTIs that we kind of did, the data we collected, because 80 colleges, we had to gather data from 80 colleges, and that actually helped. Even the quote, and it was widely covered in the newspaper because it was startling. I forget the exact figures, more than 7,000 seats, OBC seats were not filled by OBCs and were diverted in Delhi University last year in 2010. So, and colleges were very happy. They get money, they get infrastructure, they get more faculty, and they can admit more and more general category students. So everyone was actually Youth for Equality would have been very happy. They would have thought, why did we oppose this? After all, the general category, the meritorious students are getting in more. We are getting more jobs because teaching posts are sanctioned. Again, Delhi University will fill all the general category posts, and the reserved posts are not filled. They will advertise, reserved positions for assistant professor, general positions for associate professor, and they will conduct the interviews only for the associate professor, general category. Assistant professor, they will say, they will not say anything. If you ask, they will say, yeah, this is the first round. We will immediately do that. But then last 2-3 years, it's been, the advertisement has come out, but no, appointment. So altogether, it worked out as a bonanza for this general category. So that's why I would say the YFE would have been really happy. And the last point I want to say about this judgment is there is another interesting issue which came up in the discussion in this particular this last appeal which was filed. Time and again, advocate from Youth for Equality came and said, there is 27% for OBC. Fine. Let them give 27% for OBC. Now you will have some OBCs which come up into the general merit. So why should they take the general seats away? The 27% should be total 27%, whether they get in merit or reservation or whatever. And you would be surprised to know that the judges were very receptive of this argument. They immediately said, yeah, this is a very good point. Would you like to speak more? Would you like to develop on this? The judges are giving them time. They said, please develop this. And then they say, we'll need more time to develop this. So we will meet after 2 weeks. And then they meet after 2 weeks and they basically have nothing more to say. Whereas our advocate said, see, the reservation is not a communal quota. This is very clear right from the first constitutional listing. This is not communal quota, so it doesn't mean that you count all the people, however. This has to be given to people who need reservation. So if you don't need reservation, whatever be your category, you don't need reservation. You are not counted. You are a general category, right? Whereas even now, I would say, if you go to Delhi University, you ask an average Delhi University teacher will be very pained at the fact that reserved students are taking away general category. At the time of admission, my friends who are in admission committees come and tell us, teachers say, oh, bechara, ek general category ka seat ja raha hai. Why don't we count them? And in 2010, Delhi University very cleverly for SC/STs, they said clearly all SC/ST candidates who are admitted in general merit will not be counted towards quota. But very cleverly, they forgot, as per the Dean of Student Welfare, we asked him, he said, oh, that was just an omission. They forgot to mention this clause in the OBC. And colleges immediately say, no, this is not mentioned in OBC. So that rule applies only to SC/ST. For OBCs, they are counted, whatever their percentage is. If you are OBC, you are OBC. How can you get dual advantage? What is this dual advantage? If you are general merit, you didn't get any advantage. What is the advantage you are getting? And they will say, no, one general category is not General is general, right? I mean, the Rajiv Sahai judgment also makes it very clear. General is, but in spite of that, in spite of this getting written in judgments, in spite of this getting in rule books, prospectus, everywhere, if you ask an average, at least in Delhi University, I'm sure, a student or a teacher, they will say, no, general category means, it's not, you are not SC, ST or OBC. It's not, doesn't mean that you didn't get the benefit of reservation. It just means that, so, this is the mindset. And this mindset is not going to change. It will not, I don't think it will change in the near future unless like we have large scale affirmative action, unless the social fabric of the university changes as it has been changing in EFL University. So I think, the last point I wanted to say was that now this, so the advocates could not raise this, they could not develop this point and they could not kind of come with any kind of conclusive thing. So finally in the judgment, as the last paragraph of the judgment says, now another question that has come before us is the issue of reserved category candidates who come into general merit, whether should they be counted towards quota or not. So they are opening an issue. So this, in the judgment they are saying this, right? So this has come up. Now this requires further deliberation, and so we don't want to say anything on that now. So we will look at it in future. It means it's just asking, okay, whoever wants Youth for Equality or whoever, please come file another litigation. Let's open this again. Let us now consider whether if quota should be reverted to communal quota or it should be based on kind of need-based kind of quota. So this is my kind of prognosis about this judgment. It really opens this issue and it's calling for action actually. Litigation, that please come and file. We will with very good this thing, we will say that let people who come in the merit, let them be also counted and let us make it communal quota. So I think that is going to be the next kind of attack on this. So I think I spoke more than half an hour, I think, although I said I'll speak only for 20 minutes. So thank you very much for your, if there is any kind of, any point if there is anything to discuss, I'm not here to answer or give solutions or answers to your all. But if there are things to discuss, because you can also tell me because you have a better model of implementing reservation over the years. So I think I can get educated from your answers.
Just a clarification about so-called FO model. Because there is no FO model as such. There are models, and then I know only about the research programs. How it is implemented in the research programs. In 2009-10, in the Board of Research Studies, when the discussion came up, they wanted to ended up 10% of the last admitted candidate in the general category.
Oh.
If the last admitted candidate in the general category is 65, then 6.5% will be relaxed for the OBC.
6.5% of that.
So then, this is not the way to treat the cutoff point. Some of us questioned it. Said cutoff, if you look at the judgment is given in the case of IITs where the cutoff is already
precisely.
Beforehand, before the examination itself. This is the minimum that you need to apply for this program.
Yeah.
So unless you announce it in the beginning, before the exam itself, now you cannot treat it as a cutoff. It is an actual cutoff. What they are saying is the proposed cutoff. The minimum, if you believe in quality or merit, this is what you need to get in order to enter. So if you don't have cutoff, then you cannot implement this 10% cutoff.
Yeah.
So 27% has to be filled up with OBC. If there is no cutoff, announced in the beginning.
Yes, precisely.
But they did not reserve those, they went ahead with it.
You mean it was then done in this particular manner, in 6.5? Oh.
In 2009-10.
2009-10, but in research program.
But actually we spoke to the memorial regarding the same problem what you were explaining. Damsa gave a requisition regarding this whole issue. And later he, for the second counseling, he implemented the 10 marks, not percentage of this, like 200.
But still on the last admitted.
Last admitted.
On the last admitted still, right? Yeah. Which is not the right thing. So if you have not fixed any this minimum, then there should be, the judges very clearly asked that if you don't have a minimum for general category you are saying you are willing to go to zero because we are not fixing any minimum. Then how can you say no, but for OBC we will not do that? You have to, that's the principle of equity.
That was in 2009-10. What happened in the 2010-11? They announced the cutoff in the beginning.
Okay, yeah.
Minimum 50% for everybody. So if it is 50%, then it is 40%.
45, yeah. Whereas, I mean, ideally, at least according to the Dalvir Bhandari judgment, it should have been 40.
40%.
40.
In the prospectus itself. But when entrance exam happened, when the evaluation of the answer scripts happened, when the board of research studies met, many of the general category students did not get it. So the general category seats are going to be vacant now. Because the cut-off marks were announced in the beginning. Then they completely abandoned that idea of cut-off.
Okay.
And again they went back to the old one. The last admitted candidate is the cut-off in the general category.
Oh, okay. Still, that was implemented.
They announced the cut-off in the beginning because we raised that issue this previous year. And now there is no cut-off announced in the beginning. It's again the last candidate. Now it is 10%, not the 10% of that, but general 10%. That is in the for the research programs. But I heard that in undergraduate courses, they have implemented it in different ways in different schools.
Oh, so there is no one model. That's what. Yeah. So you don't have to go to many universities. Even in one university, you're seeing the.
And also, it's not without debate. Every DRC somehow it becomes ad hoc. The problem is that it's not really regulated in a way that you think that's the right to make the.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, it depends on the person's there. Then, I mean, like.
Because there are elements within that system who will try to say, oh, let's institute a cutoff now. Even though this year also that's what happened, was attempted. Let's implement a cutoff. Even though we know that actually.
I mean, they reduce the marks below the cutoff. But how do they know the category of the script?
They are not supposed to know the category of the students, but somehow they will announce it in the beginning. If you can make a copy of it from the website, you can carry it with the register number. Register number, name, category will be announced in the beginning. If a clever teacher can copy it, they can keep that and look at who is this person, what is the category, and then just forward that.
So there is no fictitious numbering for.
There was no decoding and recoding of the answer scripts.
There are only 8 papers.
People who can indulge in that, they can indulge in that. They scope for that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they were like, although this is not a matter of like the intention. I mean, that is another issue which we talk about. This is another issue we talk about, like, because quite often when this question of caste discrimination comes, I heard it was also in the recent debate which is going on here. This was raised that the vice chancellor it seems said. There is no caste discrimination here. I don't think people intentionally, do this. But the basic thing is, there are certain kinds of crimes which, intention and motive are kind of really there, and that can maybe the case in certain kinds of discrimination. But then not all kinds of discrimination need be based on the motive or intention, because there are certain kinds of discrimination which is systemic in nature. So that the very system itself, like patriarchy for instance, very system itself, so you may try to get out of it, but then still you do it. So that way it really becomes difficult to come out of it. So whether, quite often when we say that teachers deliberately do this, so it may not be that they have what's called malicious intent and they do it, but then the very system kind of is such that you only do it that way, right? There is no other way to do it unless you are aware of it and you wake up out of it. Otherwise, there is no way. You end up failing the same kind of students. Unless you realize that, the kind of students I'm failing, there is something wrong with my teaching or with my evaluation or with the courses, or there is something that I need to address and do. Otherwise, you end up and you say, I didn't do anything. What do I do? I taught everyone. I use the same question paper, but then they don't get marks. So what do I do? This is a systemic kind of failure.
So if you want to look for the models, I think the best way is to look at the state universities, which are implementing OBC reservations.
Which universities?
State universities.
State universities.
70, 80 years. From 70, 80 years.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
The central universities are not equipped to deal with OBC reservation. One, because it's a new phenomenon. Number two, as you said, the people who are occupying certain positions in these institutions are not willing to operate in a
who said that central universities are agraharas? I mean, was it Kachaileya or somebody said that?
It is also, and we have heard that, sir was explaining about all the legal, that how arithmetic happens. Like you heard that Hari Babu is doing his LLB first.
It's supposed to be a secret.
That's why he's so expert.
That's supposed to be a secret.